Welcome to Good Catholic Great Stories, where we explore fascinating stories from and for the world of Catholicism. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Good Catholic Great Stories. I'm your host, Peter, and today we're joined by our friend, Father John Eckert. Father John Eckert is a priest of the Diocese of Charlotte. A Cradle Catholic, he graduated from St. Louis University in 2004 with a degree in political science and communications. He entered seminary soon after, studying at the Pontifical College Josephinum in Ohio. In 2010, he was ordained a priest of the Diocese of Charlotte. He now serves as pastor of Sacred Heart Catholic Church in Salisbury, North Carolina, where he has been in residence since 2014. Father John, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Peter. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you. Obviously, we've worked together a few times now on a couple Good Catholic series, both the Full of Grace series as well as the more recent Overcoming Deadly Sin series. So it's always great when we get to work together and have a conversation.
Absolutely.
So today we just want to kind of get to know you a little bit better and introduce you a little more fully to our customers and our listeners. So I really want to hear about how the Lord called you into the vocation of priesthood in particular.
Sure.
So I know you've mentioned that you came from a big Catholic family, right? You're a Cradle Catholic. So would you just kind of start there and tell us how that experience sort of influenced your faith and
Absolutely.
where you are today?
I like to kind of joke that, so we talk about Cradle Catholics. I made the joke many times that I've been Catholic since I was conceived because from the time that it was known that my mom was going to have a boy, my grandma O'Brien declared that I would be a priest. So it's like from the beginning, it was sort of like foreordained. It was one of those things I like to say that my parents were so good about not making us go to Mass, but making us want to go to Mass. I can think of maybe like 2 times, maybe 3 times in my life where I didn't go to Mass on a Sunday. Thanks be to God, I'm a priest, so even COVID, there was still Mass. Even when I was quarantined, thanks be to God. It's one of the biggest perks of being a priest. There will be Mass. It's like it's going to happen. And so it's always been a big part of the life. And I was born in New Jersey, but by the time I was 1, we moved back to Illinois, where my family comes from, Decatur, Illinois. It's the big home of Staley's, like all kinds of fun stuff. Anyway, we lived in the neighborhood where the church was, very close to my grandparents who were right there.
That's great.
And it's really cool. So it's like my mom's parents lived close to the church forever. And then eventually my dad's parents moved into the old convent. So it's like between them was the parish, walking distance for everyone.
So the bells, the church bells were probably just a part of your constant soundtrack.
It was so
That's
wonderful. And I remember as a young child, my grandpa O'Brien would walk my brother and I over to the church, and we would count the O's on the sign because it was Our Lady of Lourdes. So there were many O's, and that would be part of the fun. And I remember going over to the church and just loving to be in the church. And there's something about, this. They talk about the smells and the bells. Right. Like literally the smell of the inside of the church, the burning of the candles, and just that. It's like feeling at home in the church from the youngest of ages, Wow. And I was very, very blessed to have that. And so the idea of the priesthood was just always there. And it's funny because there's this story. I do a lot of retreats with the Dominican Sisters of Mary, Mother of the Eucharist up in Ann Arbor. I love it. The Vocation
I've known a few of those sisters too, and they're incredible.
They're so good. They're so on fire. And but I've been blessed to get to do some Vocation retreats with them. And I always talk about this in the Vocation story, and I always tell them, it's kind of an embarrassing story, so don't tell anybody, okay? So just like, I know it's a podcast, don't tell anybody. But
Pay no attention to the microphone.
Yeah, exactly. But when I was in 3-year-old preschool, there was a girl, her name's Katie Burris, and this is the funny thing, it's come back to me now later on. And I'll explain that in a minute. But 3-year-old preschool, Katie comes up to me on the playground and says, "Johnny Eckert, I'm going to kiss you." And I said, No, I'm going to be a priest. So as a 3-year-old, this was already in my mind. And the reason I say it comes back, I had a parishioner a couple months ago. On the way out of church, she's like, this lady was talking to my mom, and she said something about, there's this priest, and her granddaughter in preschool said she was going to kiss him. I'm like, are you talking about the Burrises? She goes, yeah. And she said, that's our pastor. It's funny how, it's a small world.
Right.
But especially once you get into the Catholic world, it's like you got to be careful what you say because, hey, someone's going to say it's going to come back. Somebody in this. And so it's just, the faith has always been there. I started serving as soon as I could.
Mm-hmm.
We moved from Decatur, Illinois to Peoria, Illinois when I was in the 3rd grade. And the Diocese of Peoria, it's Fulton Sheen country, which is wonderful. We actually went to the same high school. We graduated a few years apart.
Well, I went to the same college.
Isn't that wonderful? Oh, yeah, you went to Catholic U.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And actually, it was a different name when you went there, too.
Yeah, it was.
So
It was very different.
It's okay. It's okay. But, any links we can have to Fulton Sheen, we're happy
No, but really,
about them. So I grew up in Peoria, and they had a wonderful vocations program going up called Emmaus Days, and it was like 4 sections of this like summer camp. And it began, it was like 7th and 8th graders, then freshman, sophomore, junior, all the way up, like 4 different sections. Yeah. I snuck on a year early. I mean, it was like, I was so ready to go. There was a year where there was going to be a family vacation, and I worked it out where I wouldn't go on the family vacation. I went to the summer camp. It was just one of those things where I love serving, I love the church, I love the prayer life. Like, it just was so beautiful. However, as you said, I went to St. Louis University, and as you mentioned, I didn't major in philosophy. I didn't go right into seminary out of high school. When I was in high school, 2 things happened. I visited some seminaries with one of my best friends, and it was one of those things where, especially 17, 18 years old, I love the idea of the priesthood. Mm-hmm. The seminary scared the heck out of me. I've never had a curfew in my life. I've never really needed one, I remember one time I stayed out too late, like watched a movie at a friend's house and fell asleep and came home at like 2 a.m. And I remember like peeked my head into my parents' room and I was like, hey, I'm home. And my dad said, never again. And I didn't. That was it. That's all it took. It was fine, it was helpful. But the seminary was like, you're in at this time. You're up at 6 a.m. Oh my goodness, how could I ever get up at 6 a.m.? I mean, it's so funny now looking back, but just the structure of the life and the day and all that, at 17, 18, I just wasn't ready for it.
Right.
Plus, I had a girlfriend for a while in high
That'll
school.
do it.
Exactly. It's one of those things where it's like, I don't know. I don't know if this is what I'm supposed to do. So obviously, I didn't go into seminary out of high school, so I was like, well, I'm not going to be a priest if I'm not going to seminary, so what am I going to do? I'm not going to be a priest? I'll be a politician. It's like, obviously, there's the other thing to do. My dad worked for the government for years. He was a national bank examiner, and one of the cool treats we got growing up was we got to go with him on trips to D.C., and I loved Washington, D.C. It was so awesome. So it was like, studying political science would be wonderful and all this. Yeah. And at first I was set up to go to Bradley University in Peoria, but then I visited a friend at St. Louis University. And it was over Palm Sunday weekend. And they had a 10 p.m. Sunday night mass, which now sounds ridiculous.
It sounds
to me.
insane. Yeah.
Like, it's funny how things have shifted. 10 p.m. mass then? Oh, yeah, of course.
Well,
now.
It's just like one of those college things. I remember.
It's great.
As an undergrad, there was, I think, a 10 o'clock? Was it 9:30 or 10 o'clock? I don't remember. It was either 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. mass every day.
Really?
And we loved it.
Of course.
It was great. And then
it's meeting people who are there, which is great.
Yeah, and then
I'm not a college chaplain.
Oh yeah, and then after graduation, I was like, how did those priests do that?
Yeah, it's a whole different way of life.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. I don't know when their wake up time is, but it can't be super early. But I remember just the sight of, like, they had the big procession into the church. It's St. Francis Xavier College Church, this big, beautiful Gothic stone church right there at Grand and Laclede in the heart of St. Louis. And this big procession of like these 1,000 students going in, it just hit me. I was like, I need to go to a Catholic school. And got some things worked out. They were wonderful at SLU, worked with me, scholarships, financial aid, all that, and ended up going there. And it was a wonderful college experience.
It's funny. I'm not too familiar with St. Louis University, but everyone I've met who went there or even had any association with SLU, as they call it, right, has always said amazing things about it.
Yeah, it's a great place. And unfortunately, he wasn't there then, but now Father David McConey runs the Catholic Studies program. He's amazing. He just came out with a new book, I think that Tan put out, that's, I think it's called The First 500 Years of Christ's Life, or Christ Unfurled, The First 500 Years of Jesus' Life. Like, it's about church history.
Oh, wow.
And especially coming up on Pentecost. Like, it's just, he's such a good writer. But he's so good with the students. We had some wonderful chaplains, too. And, like, that 10 p.m. Sunday night mass, it was one of those things where we went. I mean, it was like, so I was in a social fraternity. we did things we shouldn't have done at times, right? But we had a good group of guys that got the other guys to Mass. And it was funny because like we had like the first 3 rows in the church was where we sat.
There you go.
Which is it's a unique sort of peer pressure, but it's like you just never missed, it's like we all went together. And that best friend of mine and I from high school, we ended up going together to SLU. We were roommates freshman year, we were neighbors the next year in the Greek dorm, and then we had pretty close apartments on campus after that. And like we kind of held each other in check. And it's funny because from our fraternity, 4 of us are now priests, which is pretty incredible. It's like one of the, and it wasn't like the Catholic fraternity. It was a beautiful thing that was like, in the midst of a normal sort of like college campus culture, the culture of the faith, was there and was a part of everything. And like I said before about, missing Mass 2 different times, I joke that there was one time in college, I think it was over the summer, I stayed out too late on a Saturday night, and I missed Mass on Sunday. I felt so bad about it. I went to confession on Monday, and I think I went to daily Mass like 3 times that week. And it was back, and I said that was my period away from the church. And I joke about it, but I'm so grateful to God that was my period away from the church. You know what I mean? And I lived a pretty normal college life. I was in student government, stayed active like with lecturing, serving, that at Mass. And I had a great job. I worked for Anheuser-Busch. I was a tour guide, and I worked in the gift shop.
I remember you telling me about this.
It's the best. And it was, the motto of Anheuser-Busch is making friends is our business. And I'll tell you, and I joke about this, but I think some of the best formation I got for the priesthood was being a tour guide at Anheuser-Busch, and I was a janitor all through high school. And it really did help because janitorial work, it's good, just, good manual labor. It's like you're doing hard stuff. But I remember in a lot of places, like, being treated as sort of like less than human sometimes. It's like, hey, do that, like not even paying. It's like that, you don't like being treated like that.
Right.
And so like learning, like, you don't want to treat anybody like that. Like, hey, we all are working together, we're all part of the body of Christ here. Let's all do our parts and whatever that may be. And, if the janitors go away, guess what? Like, we got a lot of stuff to deal with.
And I feel like there's also a lesson there, at least I found in my life when I've had manual jobs, right? It's either that you learn to do those small things with pride and integrity, or you get really bitter, really quickly.
Absolutely.
And so that's the choice you get as a janitor,
and it's up to you,
up aisles or whatever it is.
And there's always going to be. It's the same way as a priest. There's always going to be people who don't treat you great because of what you do, right? We live in an interesting time in church history. There's been a lot of things that have not, looked good because of what some of my brother priests have done. And there's no excusing that. Right. And and some of that gets splattered onto you. But same thing, like you can choose what you do with that. It's like, well, if I need to bear some of this, in reparation for things that happen, so be it. God, give me the strength, please, to be a good priest. But like there's that from the janitorial side. And then with the Anheuser-Busch side, like I said, tour guide, taking up to like 90 people out on tour 4 times a day, showing them a good time for an hour and a half, like, introducing them to the company. Like I said, making friends is our business, which is a really good motto. And I loved it, like working with the Clydesdales, that was a lot of fun. And because they'd be like out in like this little paddock for the first stop on the tour. And inevitably, this is one of my favorite things to do. It's kind of dishonest, but it was fun. I'd listen, if I'd hear some names, as people are walking along. I'd say, this is Harry. My name's Harry. Are you kidding me? Like his name wasn't Harry, but it was fun to say it because like I knew this person was there, and then we'd go into the stables where the Clydesdales were. And like the corny jokes were so great. I'd be like, welcome to the, the Clydesdale stables built in this year and all this in honor of Prohibition. Please feel free to look around. Just please, no horsing around. Like stuff like that was the best, And so it's like you're having fun, but also getting used to, public speaking in front of 90 strangers that by the end should be your friends, and you're selling to them, the king of beers, and all these other different products. And I loved it, and it was a lot of fun, and in some ways a lot easier than what I do now. But now it's like, yes, it's still making friends as our business, but it's doing it for something I believe in a lot more than the king of beers. You know what I mean? And nothing against the company, and they were wonderful, and it was a great, and I'm grateful I got to be with them, and I feel like that helped me to be comfortable in front of a crowd, and because now, we're public speaking every single
All
day.
the time, yeah.
And, because you're always working on the next homily and the next thing. But the beautiful thing about this life is, I totally believe in everything. Just like, so as political science was the major, I worked for Anheuser-Busch. Obviously, politics, they're important. I mean, it's it's a crazy world. By the end of that, like when I was getting towards the end of college, I had a serious girlfriend that I was sure I was going to marry. She went abroad to Spain at our campus in Madrid. We lasted for a little while, but the long distance didn't work, and all, and just these things happen. That's college. I'm grateful that, we were with each other for a while we were. And also, in a way, as a priest now for 11 years, I'm grateful I got to have my heart broken, because it's like I know what that's like.
Yeah.
And going through that experience helps me to minister to others. And, so it was good. I kind of lived that normal college life. It was great. But by the end, when I'm looking at the next thing, it's like, well, politics, there's a lot of compromises you have to make to get ahead, right? And not to say that, politicians by nature are two-faced. It's not that. And you got to have good people in politics.
Yeah, it is a tricky, industry. It's a hard way of life.
It really is. And I couldn't do it. It just wasn't for me. And there was that. I thought about staying on with Anheuser-Busch. And I remember this best friend of mine and I went to visit a priest friend from growing up. And he was asking us what we're doing. I was like, I'm kind of thinking about staying on with Anheuser-Busch. I really like the company. And he looked at me and he goes, "Oh, John," he goes, you're just made for so much more. He goes, "It's a good company, but just you're made for so much more." And it's one of those things where it's one thing when you get yelled at, and I got yelled at too, and I could tell that story also because it was very helpful. But it's when people are disappointed. Now, you can't do it because they're disappointed.
Right. You can't do it to satisfy someone else's desires or to change their view of you.
Exactly. I mean, because that's not going to last.
Right.
If you're not actually called to it, just because you don't want to disappoint Father so-and-so, that's not going to keep you going.
Right.
But God works.
But it is convicting.
Oh, yes, it is.
It is, yeah.
It's huge. And I remember, as I mentioned, my grandma O'Brien, when she found out my mom was having a boy, was convinced I'm going to be a priest. Right. When I was dating in college, it's like, well, I guess that's not going to happen. It's like she was just so upset. It's like, Grandma, just calm down. And then, as soon as I graduated from college, I went into seminary. And anybody who's a seminary priest knows this is a big no-no. But, I had been in for, a month. And she already had my aunt buy a chalice from Rome. Ooh. It's like, you don't, I mean, that's like you just went on the first date, and then it's like, I already have the wedding ring.
Right.
Whoa, you gotta slow down there. But so I didn't display that. It's like, thank you, Grandma. We're gonna keep that hidden for a while. So, that's the way she was. But it's like, at the end of college, looking ahead, what am I called to? And I knew that I needed to at least give the seminary a shot. It was 2004. I was about to graduate, and this is the one when I got yelled at. I was walking down campus, and we had this chaplain in the campus ministry. He was a good guy. He was a big, kind of brash sort of Jesuit, and he was the type that would punch you in the arm to be funny, but it would actually hurt. It's just And he drove around. He always had this 3-wheeled golf cart, which was funny to me. And he's driving down. He's like, "John Eckert, I want to talk to you." Okay. He's like, "Come to my office." And he just speeds on by.
Yeah.
So I go to his office, and he's like, "What are you doing next year?" I said, "Well, so I'm thinking about this master's degree in political communication." Like I said, I'm not sure. I'm trying to put off the seminary.
He just gave an answer.
Oh, yeah.
Right,
It's I'm being talked into this. I'm thinking this is the way I want to go. And he goes, "What?" He goes, "I thought you were going to the seminary." Well, I think maybe eventually, but I think first I'm going to get this master's degree. And I won't yell, so you have this microphone right in front of him. He's like, "That's the stupidest thing I ever heard." He's like, "Either you go into seminary or you don't. Don't just keep putting it off." And so I went on this retreat. My dad's been going to silent Jesuit retreats in St. Louis for 20-something years. It's called the White House Jesuit Retreat House. And I remember going there and just making the decision, okay, I'm going to do this. Right. And so I entered seminary for the Diocese of Peoria right out of college. And I'll be honest, the first year was excruciating. I mean, it was really tough to go from a college of 12,000 co-ed, undergrad, all these things going on, to a campus at the time of 160 guys that I don't really know well. They're from all sorts of different places. And it was just, I remember that first Friday night in seminary, for some reason, which is funny because it wasn't this way all the time. There was nothing going on. And I'm just in my dorm room in the seminary, and just like, what am I doing? Or like, I remember we had logic at 8 a.m. on Monday morning, and like, what is going on? Like, what have I left behind?
And of all the things to have at Monday morning
Logic.
at 8 a.m., logic.
Yeah, I know. And it took me a while to get excited and get into it. But eventually started meeting, other friends, getting to know the other guys well. And you develop these bonds because everybody's going through the same thing. Celibacy is a tough thing to discern. Mm-hmm. And so as you go through that and you're vulnerable with other people and, just saying, it's like, I'm having a real hard time with this. Like, so am I. Like, it's not like it's just easy now, but because you're not alone.
Yeah, but I would imagine that's sort of a kind of a snap moment where suddenly things start to be a little more clear, a little easier.
Absolutely.
And not necessarily easier, but...
in some way, yes.
But even just not being alone.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that line, and The Man Who Is Thursday by G.K. Chesterton. It's totally a paraphrase, but where he talks about, the difference between 1 and 2 is like astronomical. Like, like math may say that it's 1, 2 is just double 1, but no, they're like infinitely different. Because all of a sudden, you're not alone in this.
Yeah. And
that makes an incredible difference. It was like knowing I've got these other guys that are going through the same thing. It helped, and they're still some of my best friends. And it was a really good fraternity there, guys supporting each other. And it was one of those things where you recognize the church is better served when she has, more and more good priests. And this is the thing, too. I mean, we entered 2004, and the whole scandal broke in 2002.
Shortly before that, yeah.
Yeah, and all of a sudden, it's like the requirements to enter got tougher. There were a lot of background checks and psychological evaluations, and you met with all these different people. I mean, the very first thing that I went through, it wasn't like, okay, let's give you a catechism class. Let's do this. The very first thing we did was the Protecting God's Children training. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, nothing against it, but it was like, that was a really hard way to start.
That's got to feel like a shot across the bow.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
It was just like, okay, this is the church in which we are right now.
Yeah, this is the burning building we're going to run into.
Whew. And I remember, and actually, one of those sort of big wake-up calls. I graduated from SLU in May of 2004. It was a Saturday. It was like the 14th, I think. And that Monday, I went back to work for the janitorial company I worked for during high school for the summer until I went into seminary, and I was in a mailroom at a big Caterpillar facility just outside of Peoria. I remember like a week or two into this guy comes up to me. I've never talked to him before, and he's like, hey, I hear you're going to the seminary. And I was like, yeah, I am. On my way. I'm 22 years old. Yeah. Like, yeah, I'm starting in August. He goes, what, do you like little boys or something? I was like, seriously? Like,
wow.
I'm a little boy myself. Like, what are you talking about? It was just things like that. Mm-hmm. And it's like all of a sudden that kind of hits you, but it didn't deter you from going. It's like, I need to do this. It's like, I love the church. The church who has given me everything all the way through. Mm-hmm. It's like going back to the smells and bells as a child, and my parents taking me and loving to serve and praying the Rosary and going to Mass, like everything. It's like, I want this to be defended, and I don't want, a couple of people to ruin this for everybody else. And so it's like you give your whole life and you run into it. Yeah. And I'm so grateful I got to do that. The thing that like really solidified everything was that first summer assignment. 'Cause, as seminarians, we spend a summer in a parish. It's kind of like an internship.
Right.
And once I got to do that, and it was St. Mary's in Pontiac, Illinois, it was awesome. I mean, it was like, okay, yeah, this is what I'm called to do. Yeah. So it was just such a great thing, and stuck with it, obviously, and big surprise. Yeah, I was ordained in June of 2010.
Oh, God be praised.
Yeah, so that's awesome.
So one of the things I'm struck by in all of that is your relationships and your love for parish life, if we can put it that way.
Yeah.
Because, people will be discerning their vocation, and they'll think about, maybe I'll be a priest, or maybe I'll be a religious, or, even among men in particular, they might think, oh, I want to be a priest, but I don't know if I want to be a parochial priest. I don't know if I want to be a diocesan priest. And so there's almost a sub-vocation. There's like a calling within the calling. And it, frankly, if I can say, personally, when I look at you, I see someone who's like fully alive in their vocation. I see someone who you clearly love being a priest, and you clearly love being a parish priest. I've just seen that in how we work together, and just sort of when I'm around you, it's clear, and I hope it's clear to all of our listeners that you love being a parish priest. So I really like how it began for you in a parish, with your family, and kind of the smells and bells, and feeling that sense of home, feeling that sense of belonging, even at a young age.
Yeah.
And then it really clicked with you in seminary when you were assigned to a parish.
Absolutely.
And you got to do that little internship.
Yeah, it was just, something really took off. And, and there were still struggles. I mean, it wasn't just like, oh, yeah, this is obvious.
Yeah.
And I remember in seminary, one of our professors, Dr. Perry Cahall, who's wonderful, he's a married man, has 2 children. And I remember him telling us, like, gentlemen, a bunch of seminarians, studying to be priests, like, you guys have the harder vocation to discern. We have the harder vocation to live. I said, something goes wrong in your relationships, like, it's your fault, between you and God. He's like, with us, it's 2 fallen human beings. We got to work through this, and it's not easy. And it's one of those things where being in the midst of a parish, like, it always felt like home. And as we just discussed about, the scandals in 2002 and all this, it's like, I know it's not perfect. And I know, I don't have this sort of like, glossy, idealized way of looking at it because, parish life is hard, just like married life is hard. But, the beautiful thing is, I was thinking about this morning because I love this line. In The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, when the kids haven't met Aslan yet and they're talking to Mr. Beaver and they're like, is he safe? He's like, safe? Of course he's not safe, but he's good, Yeah. And that's the beautiful thing about our vocations. They're not safe. It's hard work, and you never know. And this thing I love about diocesan priesthood, it's you never know from day to day what in the world is coming, and just from, the highest joys and great things and like participating in stuff like this, like we get to, get together and talk about helping people to overcome deadly sin, or talking about our blessed, Hail Mary, full of grace. Mm-hmm. How do we stay close to her? Let's pray that rosary and talk everything about it we can. And I love that. And we just had confirmation of the parish the other night. We just had First Communions the last couple weeks. I've had a bunch of weddings. It's physically exhausting after a while. However, as long as you're staying rooted in your prayer life, God provides, and it works out. And sometimes you get a break and it's wonderful and get a little bit of downtime, but then you get to dive right back in. And, and you're there in the hard times when people are sick and dying and, and there to help them through. And heck, even just the last year and a half of this whole COVID crisis, it's, okay, how do we keep our focus on the right stuff? Like, yes, we should minimize risk, but there's risk in everything. So how do we stay, focused on the right thing, namely our love and relationship with Jesus Christ? How do we make the sacraments available? And
it's not about minimizing risk. It's about risking for the right things.
Exactly. Yeah. I think we talked about that a little bit.
Did we really?
We did.
So. Yes, we did.
I think that, and that may have been the exact line. Because, it's like you don't want to just shoot for the safe option all the time. It's like, you do have to risk some things. And all of our vocations deal with that. And so, just like the whole life sort of nature of things, of the diocesan priesthood really appealed to me. And where I am now at Sacred Heart, it kind of shows it. It's like you get the whole, from the womb to the tomb. Because, we've got the beautiful parish, the school, the cemetery. It's all there. And, and to get to be with people and accompany them and work through everything with them, keep them close to Christ. It's an awesome way of life. Yeah. And of course, in different orders and things like that, there's a different focus or some things like
different charisms, different ways of life. Yeah,
exactly. In fact, that friend I've talked about a few times, my roommate in college, he is now a Jesuit priest, and so the diocesan life didn't appeal to him as much. But with the Jesuit priests we had in college, who were wonderful, and we had some incredible saintly priests. One of them helped me as my spiritual director to discern diocesan life. It was like, this is where you're called. And it was just a good thing because it's not like he's out for numbers for his own order. It's like he wants to help this young man discern where he's supposed to be. And it was the same thing with my friend. I think he took a year with the Jesuit Alumni Service Corps, and then a year later he entered for them. And now he's the principal of a high school in Kansas City. Huh. So, and it was funny. So he was ordained in 2015. I was ordained in 2010. So at that point, I was already pastor of my second parish and in my third assignment. And then, so he's ordained like 3 or 4 years later, he got named principal of this high school. And I remember hearing that. I was like, you're too young to be a principal. It's like, I've already been a pastor for a couple of years, but it's just funny. It's like, all of a sudden it's like, wait, when did we grow up? It's like, when did we step into this kind of stuff? Yeah. And you just kind of forget it where you are. Just like, you guys had a baby not too long ago.
Yeah.
And the cool thing or funny thing as a priest is like, wow, he you have a little human being relying on you. That's so incredible. It's like, we don't have that. So it's just, I forget, the way that works. But it's, it's the beautiful thing, having a baby. Not easy, but it's good.
Yeah.
And so, and God provides, and he's made us for a vocation. And if we listen to him and are open to him, he lets, and like you said, through the circumstances of our life, through the people that he places in our life. And even when it's the ones you don't expect, like that priest who yelled at me,
Yeah.
And I'm not a big yeller. I mean, it takes a lot for me to get to the point of yelling, but thank God that there are people who yell sometimes, because sometimes that's what you need. So, God is good.
God is good. So another kind of question just about the life of a priest. Have there been any really big surprises? I'm curious about that for you, especially as someone who kind of envisioned vocation from an early age. I was thinking about it. So once, whether it's in seminary or after your ordination and you're actually sort of in the life, what kind of surprised you?
Wow, that's a good question. I think the thing that surprised me the most is how much I appreciate all the different relationships and how God brings new ones into your life all the time. I mentioned the Dominican sisters before. I didn't know them when I was ordained a priest. In my second year at Our Lady of Grace in Greensboro, we had a principal opening. I reached out. I was like, hey, is there any chance? And God bless the sister. She's like, no, there isn't. But that's okay. And my friend, Father McConey, I mentioned earlier, recommended me to them to lead a retreat. And, and so I'm starting to get, in touch with them. Yeah. I didn't know sisters very well at all ahead of time. And but I remember going up there for that first retreat. It was in November of 2012. And just being there in the convent with these sisters who are just on fire, with love of our Lord. And, and once again, not just this ideal picturesque sort of thing, but seeing them on the ground doing this and living the life. And quite frankly, a lot more of a structured and disciplined life than we lived in the seminary. They're so much tougher than we are. It was so crazy. Because, their morning bell goes off at 5 a.m. They're in the chapel by 5:30. And then mass is at 6:30, and then they're off to the schools, and another mass at school, and then just all this stuff, and I was just so blown away by this. And the thing that surprised me was it was like there was something missing in my vocation before I met them. And I think that's one of the other great vocation crises right now in the church, is that we don't have more sisters and have more sisters in parishes. Because once again, I love celibacy. I love my celibate life. I love that I'm able to give my life in that, totally. Right. But at the same time, there is something so beautiful about the relationship between priests and sisters, totally within the realm of beautiful chaste celibacy, but the feminine genius along with the masculine genius, so to speak, and us working together, getting to know them and work with them over the years, it has helped and changed my priesthood in a big way. And so I'd say that's probably one of the biggest ones, and then just the people you get to meet along the way. And I'm excited, God willing, from heaven. I think Scott Hahn wrote about this a lot in his recent book on hope, but seeing things from heaven, how everything connected, and how this person and you cross paths along the way. Yeah. And, how awesome that is.
Sometimes you get little glimpses of the tapestry, so to speak.
It's so great, And like I said about the woman, the parishioner whose mother met the mother of the girl that talked to her. It's where did that come from? And it's incredible how those things happen. Yeah. And things that you think, right now, how could I ever do X in the future? It's well, God's going to provide, and you don't even know who's going to be a part of your life later on. Like I said, the sisters. I now have 2 nieces and 7 nephews, which, when I started at Sacred Heart, I only had 1 niece, and now there are 8 more. And that's so incredible. To be a priest uncle is one of the best things in the world. It's so great, and it's to see the way that God does that, and we just had the Ascension a couple days ago, and it's the apostles are you going to do this all now? It'll come, it'll be revealed. Yeah. And it's we're not ready for everything right now, but God gradually reveals it all. And as he does, and if you're open to it and you're paying attention, it's great. And so I think it's that radical generosity of God that comes through in all of these relationships. I'd say that's probably the thing that surprised me the most.
Okay. How are we doing on time?
We're good.
Okay. Good.
You got about 14 minutes until the next stop.
All right. I think I got about 2 questions.
Cool. That's great.
So this is a bit of a weird question that requires a little bit of preamble.
Okay.
And I might have asked this before on the podcast. I don't quite remember. So if this is redundant for some listeners, apologies, but I like the question.
Sure.
So I'm thinking about it because the feast day of St. Boniface is coming up.
Nice.
And if you're not familiar with his story, or listeners aren't familiar with his story, he was an apostle he was a missionary to Germany when it was pre-Christian. So it was still very pagan, very kind of worshiping nature. And in at one point in his life, he basically chopped down the sacred oak, I think of Odin.
Yeah.
And either it was direct combat against the god, or it was a way to show that these gods don't have power, or in any case, he basically went into the heart of this hostile society and said, no, God has power over this, and your preconceived notions are incorrect. And he removed the idol.
Sure.
So if you could pick one thing to chop down, if you could pick one sort of idol that you could, obviously not something physical.
No.
But
if
that you could just sort of, again, just chop down and force people to reevaluate it and confront the falsehood of it. Wow. What do you think you would do?
That is an awesome question. You have totally just surprised me in that. And if I'm not mistaken, his feast day is June the 5th.
Yeah, so it's
coming right up.
It's coming up.
And that's actually my anniversary of ordination.
Is it really?
It really is.
Oh.
So that's fantastic. And I remember growing up, there was a parish, St. Boniface, and their big parish feast was called Bonifest, which I think is awesome. So I'm stalling for time. I know what popped right to my mind. I'm just trying to figure out the right way to say it. I would say the thing that we should probably chop down is our strong desire to be a part of just normal secular society like everybody else. Mm-hmm. And I am putting that right within the terms of, I know the bishops are going to be talking about communion to pro-choice politicians coming up. And it's a sad thing. It's like, I feel like there's so many things we've kind of sold out on to be a part of wider society, to the point that it's like, the grave evil of abortion. It's like, no, right. We have to defend this, or it's like it's a pluralistic society. It's like, yeah, but what are we? I mean, if we had, it's going back to that whole question about politics before. Okay, I get it. We live in a pluralistic society, but what do we want that society to be? And as you look at the building up of Catholic culture, I think in some ways we've so lauded the wider culture that we forget about the Catholic culture, Yeah. And I think getting rid of, assuming that we need to be like everybody else will make us so much happier. Am I good at that all the time? No, I'm not. I mean, it's really difficult. I mean, it's an idol there, I think, for everybody, because who wants to be abnormal?
Who wants to be different?
Exactly.
It's
tough.
Not easy. It's a hard thing.
Exactly. I mean, it is tough. I mean, I feel like I have the great advantage that I get to be different in just putting on the shirt. You know, I mean, that's a lot easier in some ways. And it's one of those things where, praying to St. Boniface for courage, and also, like, how do we do this in a way that is going to make the biggest impact? Like, it's so much fun, like, when you find, like, a young couple who finds out about natural family planning, and they're just, like, blown away. Like, this is so incredible. Why didn't anybody teach us about this? It's like, yeah, I know. Like, the rich storehouse that the church has, and there's so many things that are being sold to us by the cultures. Like, well, this is what you need to do. No, you don't, And it's like, you don't need... I remember we had a professor in seminary. He used to joke, he's like, everybody thinks they need this great big house with like 15 bathrooms. He's like, what happened to our digestive systems that we need so many bathrooms in these big houses? It's like, you don't need a giant room. It's like, and you can see as we sort of buy into a lot of what society thinks is the most important, success and all of this sort of thing in the way that they dictate it, it doesn't lead to happiness, where it's like, people who are laying down their lives for one another, following the commandment that Jesus gave us at the Last Supper, love one another as I have loved you. If you really do that in your vocation, be it married, be it priesthood, be it religious, be it in the consecrated single life, you're going to be happy. Once again, is it safe? No, but it's good.
Is it easy?
Yeah, no, but it's good. And I think that, the idol that I would want to get rid of is this wanting to just be like everybody else.
Compromise with the world.
Because it doesn't lead to happiness at all. And then it leads to this like weird being Catholic haunted. Like, so you get the guilt, but you don't get the actual joy and freedom that the faith brings, Whereas when you get rid of that idol more and more, the happier that you are. And I think the more that our bishops can, encourage, and I'm not like wagging my finger,
right?
Because I know, and it's like figuring out political discourse. It's not an easy thing, and I realize we're in a pluralistic society. But if there was some way to chop down that idol,
right.
and to do it in in an ultimately faith-filled, joyful
way, yeah.
And I know that requires more, and we could probably have a whole discussion just on that.
Right.
Man, that's a great question. But yeah, ultimately, I think, at the heart of it, it's like that fitting in, that's worldly success. It doesn't ultimately lead to happiness. Ultimately, it's going to be, like our Lord in Matthew 25, about, what did you do for, the least of my brothers and sisters? You did for me. The unborn are there, the people on the peripheries, the poor, all these different folks, and that's the thing too. It's like we're Catholic before anything else, Republican or Democrat or Libertarian or whatever party, Whig. I'm trying to think of some other one too. We're Catholic first, and to have Christ at the heart of it all makes life so much better, even if not easier. So that would be my answer to that idol chopping down question.
I love it. I think that's a good one. That's a good one.
Fantastic.
All right, one final question for you.
Perfect.
To go back to kind of the vocation story and your discernment. So real broadly, any advice to folks who are in the midst of discerning their vocation, especially those who might be feeling angst or who might feel it as a pressing question in their lives?
I would say don't be afraid to take those initial steps of good, strong discernment. I think everybody knows that, you got to pray, obviously.
Right.
And you got to keep praying once you've entered into the vocation. In fact, probably more at a certain point. Don't be afraid to take those steps, to go on a vocations retreat, to go talk to a vocation director. And if you feel pulled in a particular way, like I said, I did some things with the Jesuits. I went and looked at Marytown up in northern Illinois. It's a conventual Franciscan monastery. Mm-hmm. And it just became, that's Maximilian Kolbe's order, and they have a cool Maximilian Kolbe museum there that has a replica of the starvation bunker. It's fantastic. But it's like being there, it's like, okay, I'm not called to be a Franciscan, and that's fine. I'm glad that I checked it out. But then
even now that you mention it, sorry, it occurs to me that you said, then I knew that I was going to go to seminary.
Yeah.
Or then I was thinking about going to seminary.
Exactly.
You weren't saying then I knew I was going to be a priest, or
Exactly.
then I knew I was going to be, right? It's about that next step.
Exactly.
Just that next grace-filled step.
Absolutely. Just like if, you're looking to possibly, God willing, someday marry your wife, right? Mm-hmm. It's not like when you call, hey, you want to go out to dinner? Sure, I guess we're getting married. Right. It doesn't work that way. It takes some time. Now, you may have a strong inclination on the first date, but there's still going to be a courtship and preparation period. Right. It's the same thing with the religious life and with the priesthood. It's like, don't be afraid to take the first steps, because, it's like the old thing, you miss 1,000 or every one of the shots you don't take. You gotta leap, you gotta make that leap of faith. And our Lord will make it apparent if this is for you or if it's not.
Yeah.
And, I think, the great words of St. John Paul II, do not be afraid, and if we do that, if we follow him and trust him, because the thing is, God is not trying to trick us, he wants us to be happy. And so if we trust him and follow through on what he's putting there in front of us, it'll work out, and okay, what's the worst thing that happened? Oh my gosh, you spent a year or two in the seminary. Well, good. It's going to make, if you're not
that ought to make you a better man,
exactly,
right?
Exactly. I'm grateful for my time in seminary. I'll be honest, when I went into seminary, I was not leading a great disciplined life, but my prayer life got better. I dropped 40 pounds. I was also really happy. That made life better too. I was not... When I worked for Anheuser-Busch, part of the perk was 2 free cases a month, and that doesn't exactly, help the old waistline. There was that, just things along those lines where it's a disciplined life, but anything that's worth doing, it involves discipline, and it involves growing in that. And the more you grow in that love, like I said, our Lord will make it apparent, what's going on, but you don't be afraid to trust, and also avoid sin like the plague. We've done a good job of, a lot of hand sanitizer and masks to avoid COVID. Work that hard to avoid mortal sin.
Yeah.
If you can do that, it's going to be a lot better. A little phrase I heard the other day, I don't know if we included it in Full of Grace or not, but I really like this phrase, was pray the rosary every day, because one of two things will happen. You'll stop sinning seriously, or you'll stop praying the Rosary.
I definitely wrote about that in Full of Grace.
Perfect.
I don't remember if we.
Yeah, I don't remember where we
put it in the video, but
it's funny because that feels like a lifetime ago now. Because that was pre-COVID. We got that done. That was like January.
That was pre-COVID.
That was January, I think, of 2020. Is when we got
that. So just pre-COVID, yeah.
Which feels like a lifetime ago. So
yeah. We'll talk a bit more about that in another episode.
That sounds great. So, but that would be my my big advice. Like, just dive in. Don't be afraid because like you said, it doesn't happen tomorrow, but you've got to enter into the discernment to know. And don't wait until you're, a long, long time down the road. It's like, do it now because it's totally worth it.
Yeah. Well, God be praised.
Absolutely.
All right, Father. Well, thank you so much for coming in. This has been a real pleasure.
Thank you. It's great to talk to you. I'm glad we get to do it with other people, too.
Yeah, it's good. It's nice to have someone in studio.
Exactly.
It's a good change.
It's so good. Awesome. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us on Good Catholic Great Stories. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to leave a review and subscribe. You can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and wherever podcasts are available. You can also watch the videos of these podcasts on our Good Catholic YouTube channel. Learn more at goodcatholic.com. Thanks for listening, and God bless.